Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Laura Murphy. I'm here on behalf of Tech Connect and so excited to have you for the TechHub Marketplace Safety Tech in Review conversation. So we're gearing up for the kickoff of National Safety Month in June, and along with National Safety Council, we're here to discuss some of the latest trends in safety technology in the workplace. So to kick us off today, we're going to be joined by Dr. Paige DeBaylo, research manager at National Safety Council's MSD Solutions Lab, and also by Kenna Stanley, senior research associate with the National Safety Council. And following their presentation, Hannah Everett, the senior program manager at National Safety Council, will also tell us a little bit more about the TechHub Marketplace. So we're really excited to have them. I encourage everybody to ask questions because we'll have time at the end for a live Q&A. So you can put them in the control panel, the questions panel here, and go to webinar, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So thanks so much, and I'll hand the mic over.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everybody. My name is Kenna Stanley. As Laura said, I'm a senior research associate with the National Safety Council, specifically the National Safety Council's Work to Zero initiative. If you are not familiar with the Work to Zero initiative, we are a grant-funded program under the National Safety Council, and we are exclusively focused on two key areas, and that is the reduction of serious injuries and fatalities in the workplace, and also making innovation more accessible in the workplace. So a key belief of Work to Zero is that there are technologies out there on the market today that can really help safeguard our employees and save lives. And we come in with free tools and resources that are available to kind of help you along your safety innovation journey. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of trends in safety technologies, what's out there, what people are using, but we're also going to be talking about some of the barriers to technology. And that's kind of where we come in to help you solve for those barriers and to make innovation something that is very accessible within your own organization. Before I get started into talking about trends and what we're seeing, I wanted to take a step back and kind of level set and ask the simple question of what is safety technology? So safety technology broadly refers to the tools and the systems that you have in place to prevent workplace incidents, to reduce risk, and to streamline EHS processes. A lot of the technologies that we are going to be talking about today are digital technologies, but this can also include things like simple PPE. I also want to note that technology should never replace traditional controls, and that is certainly not something that we advocate for. Instead, these technologies can often help enhance the controls you already have in place and help you save the valuable time and resources so that you can focus on some of those more high-risk areas and you can work on engaging with workers one-on-one. So at the bottom of the slide, you'll see some of the key sort of benefits of safety technology that we've gathered in our time at Work to Zero. And those are proactive injury prevention, the cost savings and cost avoidance of reduced injuries. So we often see things like reduced insurance premiums, reduced medical costs, reduced workers' compensation costs. So there are a lot of the financial benefits. Streamlined EHS management, improved compliance, and increased productivity are also some of those benefits that we see. So now that we know what safety technology is, I will really quickly give you the broad strokes of what technologies are out there. And how I did this was I sort of categorized all of the different EHS and safety technologies out there into 6 key categories. These are based off of what the technology is, how it works, and what its primary use cases are. So at the top, you'll see that these technologies tend to be the least complex. They don't require as much upfront IT infrastructure, and they tend to be a little bit more affordable than those as we go down this list. I will add that each technology and each vendor is going to be different in their costs, in their complexity, and in how well they can integrate into your systems. So that's definitely something that I recommend talking to a prospective vendor about. But at the top, we have digital management systems. These are software platforms or mobile applications that can help streamline tracking, reporting, and management of EHS activities. So think of things like EHS software, learning management systems that can help track your training, and contractor management systems. As we go down this list, we have industrial wearables. Um, these are things that like smartwatches, smart armbands, or smart PPE. And these are things that workers wear on their bodies, and it helps increase visibility into things like worker health, their location, and their exposure to risks. Think things like vital signs monitoring or fatigue or ergonomic wearables, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Next, we have sensors. If wearables are focused on the worker themselves, sensors tend to be more focused on the environment itself. So these sensors are used to detect things like environmental or equipment-related hazards. So we think of things like proximity sensors to avoid equipment collisions, fleet telematics to protect transportation and fleet workers, and work zone intrusion detection, which can actually detect if someone enters into a protected work zone or a active work site. Moving down, we have artificial intelligence and advanced analytics. There's been a lot of talk about AI. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more today. But AI and advanced analytics are really coming forward as being very helpful for identifying risk patterns and predicting future risk using your historical safety data. So this can include things like computer vision, which can be integrated into cameras to help with compliance, safety compliance, PPE compliance, for example. It also includes things like AI-powered risk modeling and the traditional chatbots and AI assistants that we may think of like Grok or ChatGPT. Moving down the list, we have immersive training. So typically when we're talking about immersive training, we are referring to either augmented or virtual reality. And these devices can really help deliver hands-on safety training through realistic and simulated environments. In the case of virtual reality, one of the key benefits is that workers can experience the risk and the hazards of a job site without actually having to step foot there. And then at the bottom of the list, we have robotics and automation, which tend to be the most complex, the most specialized to your industry. So we tend to see these a lot more in like manufacturing and production. But one of the benefits to robotics is that it helps reduce exposure to high risk or repetitive tasks. So we may think of things like industrial robots, exoskeletons, which can take some of the strain off of workers, drones for inspections or confined space inspections, and autonomous mobile robots. So that just sets the stage for some of the technologies that are out there. If you need to learn more about any of these technologies, we do have resources available to you if you're interested in narrowing in on one of these different types. But now that we have an idea about what technology is out there, what I'm talking about, and what sorts of tech is available, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the patterns and trends that we're seeing in adoption. So Work to Zero was initially formed back in 2019, and one of the first places that we started was with our foundational research, Safety Technology 2020. And in this research, we were really trying to understand what were the situations that were contributing to the greatest potential for fatalities. So instead of focusing exclusively on specific industries or tasks, we wanted to understand more broadly what hazardous situations are putting workers at risk. So looking at things like repair and maintenance, work at height, exposure to workplace violence, and so on. We wanted to understand what's contributing to fatality risk. Is it a lack of proper training? Is it lack of work site awareness? Is it fatigue? Is it impairment? And then we wanted to understand what technologies can eliminate or mitigate these risks, and what are the greatest barriers to innovation. So that was our initial research back in 2020. We took that research and we replicated it again in 2023. So that initial research, we started to understand a little bit about what employers and employees' perceptions of safety technologies are. So are they aware that these technologies are out there? How do they feel about them? Are they relevant? Are they interested in using them? Are they currently using them? And we actually replicated it again in 2023. So we were able to see these initial attitudes and perceptions in 2020 and compare them again 3 years later. In both waves of this survey, we had a sample of 500 employers and 1,000 employees across 7 safety-sensitive industries. At the bottom, you can kind of get an idea of what those are, but they represent manufacturing, construction, utilities, mining, retail, transportation, and agriculture. So some of those highest risk industries. And what we found was pretty interesting. So one of the first places that we start when we're talking about safety technology, and something we always recommend to employers, is to understand your risks and try to select a technology that works for your organization. So something that we want to avoid at Work to Zero is this sort of shiny object syndrome, right? Where a technology might look really promising, and it might work great in a specific industry or organization, but it might not fit what you need. So understanding your workplace risks, the hazards your workers are exposed to, is going to be key to identifying the right solution for you. So in our survey, we were interested in not only situations where workers were being injured, but also how employees perceived their risk of exposure. So you can kind of see on this chart here, we compared the likelihood of exposure, which is on that y-axis, and we asked employers, how likely are your employees to be to interact with these hazards or to come in contact with these hazards. And at the bottom, we had whether or not that hazardous situation actually resulted in a serious injury. And that kind of gives us the ability to prioritize and sort of see what those highest risk hazardous situations are. So what we found were that the top contributors to serious incidents and fatalities were fatigue, lack of proper training, lack of workplace awareness, which is just your awareness of the work site, of the logistics of the work site, of the inner workings of the work site, and thermal stress. So those were the causes or the contributors, but they may not have been the exact direct cause. We also have the most likely exposures. So those were the exposures that employers reported their employees most likely to interact with. And that included fatigue, heavy equipment operation, thermal stress, and work at height. And when we combine these two variables together, we get this chart in front of us. If we look at that top right quadrant, those are going to be the risks that I would really recommend focusing on first. Those are things that are both high exposure and very likely to contribute to injuries. And we can see fatigue is up there kind of on an island of its own. So we know that fatigue is going to be a key focus area for us moving forward. Also included in that are thermal stress, heavy equipment operation, and work at height. If we move down on that graph, we can see things that are low exposure but high injuries. So these are things that workers may not encounter on a day-to-day basis. It may be a little bit more rare for them to be exposed to it, but things that we know we need to have policies and procedures in place for. If we move over, we see high exposure and low injuries in that top left quadrant. And I think repair and maintenance is really interesting. Because we know that, in this survey, employers were saying a lot of their employees are engaging in repair and maintenance tasks, but they're not seeing a lot of injuries. So I think we can actually learn a lot about maybe what controls are in place or what training are in place to keep those injuries at a minimum. And then at the bottom, we have low exposure and low injuries. In no way do I want to imply that these risks don't need to be controlled for, or you don't need to have policies or controls in place. We know, for instance, that workplace violence, while it's rare, can have catastrophic implications or impacts on an organization. So this is really something that can just kind of help you prioritize your risks and understand a little bit better about what other employers are seeing in their organizations. Next, we'll get into technology adoption. So what we are seeing is that across the board, awareness of technology has grown. Consideration of technology has grown, but interestingly, usability has kind of remained stagnant. So we see most employers in our survey are falling into the central category of considering or preparing for adoption, with about over half of our participants saying that they were considering at least one technology. That other 23% were either in the pre-contemplation stage, so they may not be interested in tech, it may not be a good fit, or they may not have the resources in place to have technologies. And on the other end of the scale, we have those who are innovating. So those who currently are using safety technology, are exploring other types of solutions, or are aiming to continuously improve that solution. But what we know is that more and more individuals and employers are actually considering technology, which is great. And kind of on that same note, what we found was that 65% of employers in our survey have recently considered adopting new technologies, and 83% of employees are open to using new safety tech. So we are seeing some very positive trends in whether employees or employers are interested in using tech and their openness to technology. For those technologies that are most popular, those that are trending, these tend to have the highest usability scores. So what we're seeing is that employers reported using risk management software the most. This is not entirely surprising when we think of things like mobile applications or EHS software. This is followed by proximity sensors, work zone intrusion detection, and lone worker monitoring. But what I really want to focus on are those emerging technologies. So trending technologies are those that tend to have the highest usability. Emerging technologies are those where employers reported either trialing or testing a technology in their workplace, or if they indicated that they are considering that technology. So those that are emerging include virtual or augmented reality for training, worker impairment detection, worker health wearables, and unsurprisingly, predictive analytics and AI. So what we're seeing is we're kind of getting these sorts of baseline technologies in place in EHS software, for example. And employers are more often now considering sort of add-ons or the Internet of Things solutions that can be integrated into these softwares and used for a wide variety of risks and hazards. And you can kind of take a look at this graph. I won't go too heavily into it, but I think it shows a really interesting story about safety technology. You can see at the top that blue line is the applicability of technologies. So we asked employers whether those technologies running along the x-axis are relevant to their organization. And we can see, for example, risk management software, 92% of survey respondents said, yes, that is applicable, that's relevant to my organization. When we move to that green line, those are individuals who are either using the technology, testing it, or considering it. So we're seeing that both applicability and consideration are fairly high. And you can see that those darker lines represent the 2023 survey. So we're seeing that employers are more aware of technologies. They are becoming more relevant, or their perceptions of their relevancy are increasing. And they are also increasingly considering adoption of these technologies. But we can see at the bottom, those red lines represent whether they are actually using the technology. And we're not seeing as big of a gain in those areas. And I think that comes a lot from the different barriers that we face when we're trying to implement technologies. So we went a step further and we asked employers, what are the barriers to adoption? First and foremost, not surprisingly, your purchase costs, with 44% of employers saying that that is one of the primary barriers to safety technology. What is interesting, though, is that that barrier or the perceptions of purchase cost being a barrier is actually a little bit lower. So as technologies are kind of becoming less expensive, we are seeing that it's not as big of a barrier as it was back in 2020, which is great. Other barriers include employee compliance, employee distrust or fear, especially if you're going to be collecting sensitive or private data, identifying the right technology for your organization, and competency to adopt, which refers really to those resources, having the staff and the money in place to adopt these resources. So that was a really, really quick overview. We'll get into a little bit more the discussion about, future technology ideas, how you can determine if a technology is going to be relevant. But in the meantime, if you're interested in trying to tackle any of these barriers or learning more about safety technology, Work to Zero has our safety innovation journey, which takes you through 5 key steps of identifying, adopting, and trialing a technology. So we have completely free resources along the way to help make innovation more accessible for you and to help sort of streamline this process and overcome some of those barriers that we found in our survey. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely check that out. And if you would like to read more about the safety technology report that I talked about in this presentation, you can scan that QR code or you can find it on our website, again, completely free of charge, if you're interested in learning more about trends and attitudes in safety technology. But with that being said, I will turn it over to my colleague, Paige, who will talk a little bit more about technology and its use for the reduction of musculoskeletal disorders in the workplace. Paige?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kenna, for that overview of safety tech and their adoption across industries. It's like Kenna said, I'm Dr. Paige DeBaylo, and I'm the research manager for the MSD Solutions Lab here at the National Safety Council. And so I'll be shifting focus slightly now to delve into some of these technologies and how they're being specifically applied to musculoskeletal disorders or MSDs. And so if that is maybe a new concept for you, musculoskeletal disorders are injuries or conditions that affect muscles, nerves, tendons, joints, cartilage, or spinal discs. And within the lab, we're specifically centering and addressing work-related musculoskeletal disorders. So those are those disorders that are either caused or aggravated by the conditions in which people work. And so common MSDs are things like sprains and strains, ruptures, and tendinitis. And these injuries can really impact any part of the body and really pose significant risks, both in and out of the workplace. And so to tackle this issue head on, the National Safety Council established the MSD Solutions Lab, thanks to a generous philanthropic donation from Amazon. And we're dedicated to raising awareness and advancing solutions and supporting organizations in their efforts to prevent MSDs. And so to date, we've created dozens of resources, awarded $850,000 in grant funding, and built a network of nearly 250 organizations that have all pledged to reduce MSDs in their own workplaces, with kind of this ultimate mission to really eliminate work-related MSDs so that workers everywhere can live healthier and safer lives and spend more time doing the things that they love with the people that they love. That's kind of our mission within the lab. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Kenna. But just maybe before we dive a little bit deeper into the technologies, I'd like to just kind of provide a quick orientation to building an effective ergonomics or MSD prevention program. So this diagram that we developed in the lab serves as a helpful kind of visual framework for understanding some of the essential components of a comprehensive MSD prevention or ergonomic strategy. And so to kind of walk you through this house or structure diagram here, you can kind of see down at the bottom, the foundation is a workplace culture that prioritizes and values worker health and safety. And so this cultural commitment is really critical. It'll be probably a through line in some of the answers that Ken and I have for some questions later, but it really supports everything else that follows. And moving up kind of from that foundation, we see two key structural supports here. So leadership commitment and worker engagement. These are, again, essential for establishing strong and sustainable ergonomics programs. Then kind of moving up the house above that, we have some of the more maybe traditional pillars of ergonomic practice. So identifying and mitigating hazards, managing MSD-related medical issues, and promoting overall worker well-being. So these are really kind of those core elements, the rooms and the roof of the house, if you will. But then there's kind of one more important piece there that we just kind of see floating that I've tried to circle in yellow for you guys. But that's this innovation and collaboration piece represented by that light bulb. And so we often describe this when we're talking about the house diagram as kind of turning the lights on in the house. So it's really the element that kind of can bring everything together, kind of where some new ideas and partnerships and innovative technologies can really help to elevate and connect some of these more traditional aspects of your program. And so it's that really turning of the lights on through innovation and collaboration where I'll be kind of focusing some of my discussion today. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide again, Kenna. And so how can we turn on the lights of innovation within your ergonomics or MSD prevention programs? So we've identified some types of safety tech solutions that we've seen out there for MSDs that seem to be the most common. So we can take a minute here to review some of those key technologies that we see being deployed. So first of those is exoskeletons. And so these are wearable devices that are designed to augment, assist, or enhance a worker's physical capabilities, and they can help reduce the strain on the body during physically demanding tasks. You see there kind of moving down the line, we have collaborative robots or cobots. These are robots that are designed to work safely alongside humans, often taking on those repetitive or high force tasks that workers might be tasked with doing throughout their working time, which can help to significantly reduce the risk of MSDs. Wearable sensors are another growing area in the MSD prevention tech space. Many of us might be wearing similar technology in the forms of fitness trackers or Apple Watches right now too. But in the workplace, these sensors can provide real-time feedback on your movements, your postures, and vital signs, helping to identify risky behaviors before they can lead to an injury. We also have computer vision here, so that number 4. This is becoming increasingly popular as well. This technology uses video input, often in the form of something as simple as shooting it on your own smartphone, combined with AI to evaluate a worker's posture and movement. And so the system provides instant feedback using a color-coded system. As you can kind of see there on that guy's screen, where green would show that they're in a safe posture, yellow might be at risk, and red would indicate being in an unsafe posture. And then finally, Kenna introduced this as well, but there's extended reality, which includes both augmented and virtual reality. And while it's still emerging and we don't see it used quite as commonly as some of the others, this technology is gaining traction for training and risk identification. It can allow workers to practice tasks and identify ergonomic risks in a virtual and controlled environment before they've ever had to be exposed to those things in the real world, which can obviously be a really kind of compelling technology to deploy. And so now that we've had kind of a quick overview of these innovative technologies, I'll share just a couple case studies from our lab that showcase how organizations have been using a couple of these things in practice and what we can really learn from those experiences. So starting here with a case study from Superior Tube Products, which is a small manufacturer and fabricator that specializes in metal tubing. Superior Tube Products was facing kind of a number of MSD risks tied to the physically demanding tasks of their work, like loading and unloading steel tubing, operating heavy machinery, and performing repetitive quality inspections. So their work environment's pretty labor intensive, and they recognize the need to kind of get a clearer picture of where and how their workers were most at risk. And so to address this, they partnered with 3Motion AI to implement a computer vision solution that was actually supported by a pilot grant from the MSD Solutions Lab. And their pilot's actually still in progress, but the company's already seen some meaningful results. And so using 3Motion AI's video analysis and data dashboards, they've been able to proactively identify ergonomic risks and make some targeted workplace adjustments. And so one example of this is that the system, so the 3Motion AI system, flagged a spraying tool that had a handle that was just really long, that forced the worker to kind of work in a strange posture with kind of a hand closer to where the water came out and a hand kind of really high up on that long handle. And so they recognized that, by using the computer vision technology, this put the worker kind of in that red zone for too long of a period of time. And so they were able to kind of quickly recognize that and then just redesign the tool with a shorter handle that significantly improved the ergonomics risk for that task. But the impact kind of goes beyond some of those individual fixes too. They've seen some other awesome things so far as well. So since deploying the technology, Superior Tube Products has reported a 98% reduction in workers' compensation costs and a drop in their TRIR from 13.9% to 5.5%. A major win for both their worker safety and their operational performance. But maybe just as importantly, the technology has also boosted their employee engagement. Workers there are pretty enthusiastic about using the video capture to identify safer ways of doing their jobs, which shows how innovation can enhance not only kind of their safety outcomes, but even their workforce morale. So now moving into our next case study, another type of technology, so wearable sensors. So kind of transitioning from computer vision to these wearable sensors. We have a case study here of how Cargill partnered with Life Booster to enhance some of their ergonomic efforts. And so Cargill also faced challenges in efficiently assessing their ergonomic risks across their facilities. They had some limited resources that meant that some plants kind of lacked an understanding of what some of their most hazardous tasks were. And so to address this, they piloted Life Booster's wearable sensor system, which uses 6 body-mounted sensors to collect detailed data on their posture, their strain, vibration exposure, and heat stress. The data is analyzed through their online platform and presented via dashboards that are aligned with safety standards that can allow teams to kind of quickly identify and prioritize some of the risks. And so Cargill ran a 10-month pilot across 23 of their meat processing plants and allowed each site to use the technology for kind of a 2 to 8 week period. And in total, they were able to assess 2,350 jobs. And the time required for that data collection was reduced by approximately 83%, so saving over 1,400 hours of them doing some of those risk assessments more manually. And so while they're kind of still looking at the long-term impact of this on MSD risk reduction, some of their earlier results are showing really strong potential. Cargill noted that smaller organizations might see even faster returns as they can kind of move more quickly through some of that data collection. And so moving on to another case study that I'll share here, looking at exoskeletons. So moving on down the line, we have this case study here from Schneider Electric. And so at one of their distribution centers, warehouse workers frequently handle these large, heavy materials that put them at high risk for shoulder and low back injuries. They do tasks like unloading these large metal panels that can involve some forceful lifts and some kind of wide and awkward grips, and also frequent bending that can all contribute significantly to MSD risk. And so to address these challenges, Schneider Electric piloted a passive exoskeleton designed to reduce the load on their lower back. And the device used some springs and counterbalance mechanisms to support their bending and lifting and reaching movements. But this is kind of a different case study. So I know that Kenna mentioned, being aware of some of the bright and shiny, and this is a case where it might have not been the best fit for them. So despite some of their careful planning, and they had a lot of employee buy-in, their employees were psyched to try this out. The pilot revealed that the exoskeleton wasn't really the right fit for them. So some of the observations and assessments and employee feedback that they got pointed to a couple issues. They felt like the exoskeleton was kind of heavy on their bodies and raised their body temperatures. They also felt some restrictions in their movements, especially when they were bending and then kind of returning to that standing position. Some reporters felt like they were kind of getting snapped into place by the exoskeleton. Some users reported that they were sore during kind of that adjustment period. And a few workers attempted to lift heavier items than is typically allowed for them because they kind of felt overconfident in wearing the exoskeleton, which kind of went against some of the lifting limits at Schneider Electric. And so ultimately, Schneider concluded that they would really pivot to more engineering controls that could be more effective. So while the exoskeleton didn't meet their needs, the pilot did still offer them some valuable insights, highlighting the importance of aligning that technology with the task demands and with your worker comfort. So that allure of the bright and shiny sometimes could be good to try it out, but then recognize if it's not the right fit for your workers and pivot to something else. And so if you want to go to the next slide. That's what Schneider did. So they weren't really done there. They saw those exos that weren't the right fit for them, but kind of kept exploring some other options. So again, they have a lot of the same risk present, right? They have these workers at warehouse sites with low back and shoulder injuries due to some of the manual material handling, that they have to do. Employees in their environments often repetitively pick items that can be stored low or high, which can cause some wear and tear on the body. And so now this time they tried wearable sensor technology. So after researching some options, Schneider chose to pilot a wearable sensor that had haptic feedback to alert employees when they were engaging in risky postures or activities that could mitigate MSD risk from those manual material handling tasks. And so the wearable technology was a kind of chargeable cell phone sized sensor that could be placed into a harness that they wore. And it provided a slight vibration to them, like I mentioned, to alert them if they were kind of bending too far forward, maybe just bending too often in general, or twisting or tilting too quickly, which are considered some of those high-risk activities. And data from those activities were then compiled, and a safety score was calculated to measure their risks. They were able to kind of view their data and their safety scores as well. And so they piloted this at 2 warehouse sites. And the initial implementation, again, kind of revealed some challenges for them. They had some limited coaching and some organizational constraints at one site that kind of reduced the effectiveness. But they were able to learn from that and really adjust their approach, adding in more opportunities for employee engagement and feedback loops. The second site did experience some improved results and a stronger overall impact. So some key takeaways from this case study are that they recognize that really early engagement from IT and leadership was crucial for a smooth deployment, making sure that they have all their ducks in a row before they're implementing something. They recognize that some of that ongoing coaching and follow-up can drive better employee engagement. They also noticed that the tech helped them to identify a high-known or a previously unknown high-risk task that they didn't recognize before. That led to a kind of quick and easy workstation redesign for them, easy to implement. And it also highlighted this need for refresher training on safe lifting and body mechanics for their employees. So despite some early hurdles, Schneider was able to find value in this tech and plans to expand its use to additional sites, focusing on onboarding and some short-term refresher training to reinforce some of those safe work practices and reduce MSDs. And so those are just a couple different case studies that I wanted to share, both of times where we see the technology really working for the organization and some other instances in which we see that organizations need to adapt or be ready to kind of move on to something else if they recognize that it's not giving them the outputs that they're looking for. And so with that, Ken, if you want to go to the next slide. I'll just share too that we have a lot of resources similar to what Kenna mentioned for Work to Zero, but on our MSD Solutions Lab website that tap into some of the topics we've discussed today. So things like emerging technologies for MSD prevention. We have a full report on that if you're interested in learning more on that top QR code there. But we also have a report that kind of more specifically hones in on artificial intelligence for MSD risk reduction. So you can scan that QR code at the bottom if you're interested in that. From those two reports. But if report reading is not for you, we also have some infographics to kind of more quickly and briefly overview some of the different emerging technologies in this MSD prevention space. And so you can get access to that infographic series there by scanning that QR code. And then just one last thing that I'll mention, some of these case studies that I covered today, the MSD Solutions Lab is always interested in hearing about folks' lived experiences of trialing some of this new technology that's hitting the market. And so we are going to be housing these case studies in kind of a single library or repository, if you will, that we're calling the MSD Solutions Commons. And so we'll be launching this through our MSD Solutions website here coming soon. And it'll be a place where we house lots of different case studies, instances where the tech worked out well, instances where maybe some pivots need to be made with the tech. But those will all be shared on our MSD Solutions Commons website that's coming soon. So just wanted to share that as well. That'll take you to the website where we'll eventually have a tab for the comments. So thanks so much. I'll pass it over to you, Hannah, to talk just a little bit about TechHub Marketplace.
Thank you, Dr. DeBaylo, and thank you everyone for joining us. We are close to transitioning into our Q&A, but I did want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the TechHub Marketplace, which is the primary channel for this webinar today. My name is Hannah Everett, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Work to Zero program at the National Safety Council, and I help to run the TechHub Marketplace. So I did want to just take a few minutes to sort of let you all know about this opportunity that's available to you, whether you are a technology solution provider or whether you are someone looking for innovative technologies to incorporate into your workplace. The TechHub Marketplace is a great resource for you. So next slide, please, and let's dive right in. So before we can talk about what is the TechHub Marketplace, we want to talk about why do we have a marketplace? What was the original idea for why the National Safety Council decided to launch a marketplace? So as we know, and as we've learned over the course of this presentation, we know technology solutions can reduce injuries and save lives. Next button, please, Kenna. So why aren't they more readily adopted? Next button. Well, primarily it's because safety professionals don't always know what's available. At this time, there's not, aside from the TechHub Marketplace, a one-stop shop for being able to find and identify the right technologies and solutions. So the TechHub Marketplace was designed to connect technology buyers with technology vendors. Next slide, please. So the TechHub Marketplace is a place where the safety tech buyers and providers can connect. So when you join the TechHub Marketplace as a technology solution provider, you become an NSC technology partner. So as a partner of the TechHub Marketplace, you get the opportunity to have a profile on the TechHub Marketplace, which outlines the technologies that you provide. It also gives an opportunity for you to get connected with leads, promote your status as an NSC approved vendor, increase your visibility with safety technology buyers, be a part of our Safety Technology Advisory Council, and so much more. So if you are a technology solution provider and you're interested in learning more about the TechHub Marketplace, please do fill out our contact form at nsc.org/TechHub. Feel free to explore the marketplace, see what other technology solution providers are there, what technologies they are promoting. And if you're not a technology solution provider and you're a safety tech buyer and they're looking for some of the technologies that Kenna has outlined for us today, check out the TechHub Marketplace. It's a great place to explore what technologies are available. There's a variety of different filters on the platform, so you can filter by hazard, you can filter by type of technology, whether or not it's a wearable or an AI. It's a very very interactive and engaging platform, and I encourage you to check it out.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. And I'll go ahead and ask our other panelists to come on back on the line. I have a few discussion questions, just points of interest, and then we do have some questions from the audience that we'll go ahead and get to as well. And if you have any and you're here listening, feel free to ask them. If we aren't able to get to everything, I'm sure that this group would be happy to follow up with you after the fact. All right, so to start off with, what is NLP from AI and advanced analytics from the different technologies? Can you go more into depth about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that on. So NLP stands for Natural Language Processing, and it really enables the computer system to kind of understand and interpret human language. So it's kind of what bridges the gap between human communication and artificial intelligence. And it's what enables things like ChatGPT and Grok to talk back to you like a human. So it's just that ability to process language as humans input it instead of relying on like a data set or something like that.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll take some more audience questions on the fly, but I also want to just speak broadly. You talked a lot about emerging technologies and having the right fit. But just speaking in a kind of broad sense, can you tell what some of the promising kind of cutting edge emerging pieces are and that you're seeing active in workplaces right now? And if are there any industries specifically that are leading the way in adopting? So not just, I guess looking at this from more of an industry perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, based off of the results of that survey that I mentioned, some of those emerging technologies are going to be things like virtual and augmented reality. Paige talked a little bit about extended reality herself. So different ways that we can kind of revolutionize training. Kind of along the same lines as VR and AR training, we're also seeing things like digital training, micro trainings, which tend to be smaller, more compact. So a lot of advancements in training, I would say, are a big one. Impairment and fatigue are going to be, I think, continue to be hazards that we are going to focus on. So things that can help detect and prevent impairment and fatigue. Wearables, I think, are going to continue to be an emerging technology, things that can shed some light on things like worker health, worker location, and enable sort of that two-way communication. And of course, predictive analytics and artificial intelligence. I think, we've talked a lot about that. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. So those, I think, are going to continue to kind of revolutionize safety technology as well. As far as the top industries that we are seeing, we tend to see construction leading the way as far as their willingness and ability to trial different technologies. So we found in our survey that those in construction reported using more types of technologies. So they seem to be exploring a little bit more. That was followed by manufacturing, and then utilities and transportation and warehousing. But the types of technologies that they're using are going to be just a little bit different. So for example, in manufacturing, we tend to see things more like proximity sensors for forklift incidents, or things like exoskeletons or robotics to automate some of those processes. So the types of technologies they're using are just a little bit different.
All right, great, thank you. How do you know when a safety technology is truly effective? So what are the outcomes or data that you're looking at to measure, and how are you, we talked about some sensors and other solutions that help us do that, but can you tell a little bit more about how that data is collected and measured and the outcomes that you're looking for to know that it's working?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this on, and then I'll pass it over to Paige. I'm going to give the answer that nobody wants to hear, and that's going to be, it depends. So, one of the things that we talk about a lot is what is the driving purpose behind this technology? So a lot of times we think of technologies, and the first thing that we want is a reduction in incidents or in fatalities or in injuries, which is great. At the end of the day, that is what we are looking for. But these technologies can get to that end stage in a lot of different ways. So what are you looking to do? Are you looking to reduce man-hour exposure to a certain hazard? Are you trying to streamline some of the manual back-end things that you have to do so that you can, engage with employees one-on-one? Are you trying to reduce your costs, your, workers' compensation or insurance costs? Are you trying to bring down your recordable incidents? So it's going to depend on sort of what you're looking to accomplish and also what data you have available. We are currently working on sort of a beginner's guide to safety technology, which will be released this fall, but we do outline some of those KPIs and different ways that employers can measure those. But Paige, I'll turn it over to you if you have any ideas there.
Yeah, thanks, Kenna. No, I agree. And I'll just add too, I think when you're starting to maybe look or assess for injuries in your workplace, that might also come with an increase in reporting too. I think if you have tech that's supposed to be looking for those things, and you might see a little spike in maybe the number of incidents or risks that you have within your workplace. And I think that's something to be aware of, is that like as you start to pay more attention to something, you might start finding more of it. So you might actually end up seeing maybe a spike in your reports and risks, but that actually is more of a nature of you're actually paying more attention to this thing. The tech is doing what it's supposed to do by identifying that. So just maybe as a caution to not be scared of seeing a spike in your reporting or your risks. It's actually just because we're doing a better job of even detecting the existence of those things. So I'll just say that as kind of a metric to be aware of. But maybe kind of taking a different approach to that question from Kenna, but I'm thinking about like, how do I know if the safety tech works, right? Like people, say that it's good and it's validated and those kind of things. But I think some data or maybe outcomes to be kind of particularly close attention to are, do they have case studies with that safety tech in other organizations that have been done by third parties? I think a lot of times organizations do their own case studies, which is great. But I think kind of having that third party perspective of some of those case studies and understanding how it worked in a different environment can be really important. And then also something to look for, which was maybe kind of the gold standard around this, but do they have published, journal articles on their technologies as well? Has it been statistically validated in some kind of scientific trial? So maybe looking for those partnerships between safety technology providers and some universities could be beneficial as well.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about that spike. It reminds me like when you buy a car and suddenly all you can see is the car you own now. Like you're like, how does everyone have this? Did they go get it on the same day? It's like, oh man. Anyway, all right. So let's say you are a company and and you're looking to implement new safety technologies. What might be some of the challenges of that implementation? And can you speak to that? Also considering kind of a smaller size company. So think about larger or smaller companies with more or less infrastructure, and kind of any advice to overcome some challenges, or what are some challenges they should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So Work to Zero is kind of, we've built all of our resources around these sorts of top barriers that we're seeing. And kind of starting from the beginning, one of the biggest challenges is just finding the right technology. Excuse me. So, we just talked a lot about how do you know if a technology is working for you, but we also want to avoid putting in a technology where it might not make an impactful difference. So how do you know if a technology is going to be right for you? That's a big barrier. Particularly for small to medium-sized businesses, the cost and the staffing resources are going to be a potential barrier. In those cases, at the beginning of the presentation, I sort of tried to arrange those technologies by those that are going to be the least complex to the most complex, with a little bit of wiggle room in how those are organized. But, really trying to understand from your vendor if they have, similar organizations. Have they worked with small companies before? Like Paige said, can they give case studies or at least testimonials? Some vendors might be willing to put you in contact with an organization that's similar to you so that you can talk to them about the technology, how it worked, what they should anticipate. Another barrier that we see oftentimes is employee compliance or employee resistance. We're going to see this especially where a technology is either going to sort of change their workflow, change the way that they're working, or if it's going to be collecting any sort of personal or private data. So we see this for wearables, let's say. And I would say if there were two in the times I've done case studies and in talking with companies and following these implementation processes, there's sort of two key learnings that I would say are most applicable across all organizations. The first I would say is engage early and engage often. Of course, this is going to include, if you have an IT team, making sure you're in contact with them. If you have a finance team, making sure that you're, up to date with them. But this also includes the employees themselves. So when you include employees early on in this process, I'm talking before you even procure a technology, understanding what their day-to-day looks like, what hazards are they facing, and would this tool be helpful to them? So gathering that feedback up front can be extremely helpful, and making sure that you're engaging with them during the process. Transparency is going to be huge, especially for compliance and resistance. So making sure employees understand how is this technology going to benefit me, right? So they may hear on the back end that it's going to help save their supervisor X amount of hours, but if it's something that's going to, impact their day-to-day operations, or if it's something that's going to be a hindrance to them, they may not see that as a benefit. So being able to communicate what those benefits are going to be. And I would say be flexible and start with small scale pilots. So Paige shared a really excellent example of where a technology did not work out for a company, and they were able to then, sort of transition to something that did work. And that's oftentimes what we find. We've done a case study where they've tried to use wearable lone worker monitoring devices. And those wearables did not work because their employees had to attach something else to their vest. It was a little cumbersome. They were falling off. They were hitting them and causing false alarms, which is what we do not want. So they were able to take some of those learnings and actually transition into a mobile application that was a lot simpler for them. So being able to learn from these quote unquote failures is going to be huge. So engage early and pilot and start small is what I would say.
Sounds great. Yeah, getting buy-in seems key from the beginning, creating ownership there. Have you ever seen this gamified, like incentives wise, where like team members, members of the employees or whatever have like an incentive that's outside of the obvious one, which is safety? Have you seen that done, or to create? Is there ever an issue of compliance? I guess is the question of usage of solutions. Is that something that companies often face?
Yeah, and I can speak to this. I have seen absolutely sort of gamification, recognition. We talk a lot about one thing that I was just talking about is using the platforms that you already have available to you. So for example, we use Microsoft Teams, right? So maybe using that communication platform as a way to just recognize employees if they were being particularly safe, or if they came up with an innovative solution. So we have seen, those sorts of recognition systems in place, which can be helpful. There are also some vendors out there that can offer some more external sorts of benefits and incentives. But, compliance can absolutely be a challenge. Like I said, especially if it's going to disrupt their workflows. One way that you can combat this is just by being transparent. If it's going to be a technology that is maybe collecting personal or private information, maybe give them the option to opt in or opt out for a little bit. Right. Another area that we tend to recommend is to have digital champions. So this could be maybe one person on your team or a group of people on your team who can sort of be peer-to-peer coaches, right? So they should represent, hopefully every level of your organization, and especially your frontline workers. But these are people who, can really help get their coworkers excited about these technologies. Maybe they're great communicators. Maybe they just built a lot of trust with their coworkers. But these folks can really help kind of drive compliance and ease some of those concerns from someone who is, on the same level as them, as opposed to your management or your supervisor.
Yeah, that all makes sense. That's great. All right. Let's see. All right, we have not a lot of time, so I do want to spend some time looking ahead. So, and there are a couple other questions we'll try to get to as well. But what do you think might define the next era? Looking ahead at safety technology, and given how quickly technologies are progressing, and also kind of looking at adoption trends and things like that. If you had to rub a crystal ball and sort of speculate about what that could look like, whether from what problems are we solving to what solutions are available or what technologies are available, what technologies are more broadly adopted. Do you have any, yeah, I guess what would you say? Kind of what does the magic 8 ball say about the future?
I'm happy to take a stab at this one too. I mean, we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence, and if you're tired of hearing about it, I don't think you're going to get away from it anytime soon. I think AI is really going to revolutionize the way that we see and handle data. I think a major trend too is going to be sort of more interconnected systems. So I used a term earlier, Internet of Things. And this really refers to technologies that can communicate and pair with one another. So one example might be if you have, an EHS software that you are using to track your incidents or your near misses. We're seeing there are a lot of great technologies and some that are constantly evolving that can actually help to, or can actually connect to those EHS softwares. So for example, if a employer is wearing a wearable technology, that data can actually communicate with that EHS software to give you a better idea of your risk profile, to help generate, predictive analytics into what your future risks might be. So I would definitely say that just having these sort of interconnected technologies is going to be, I think, probably the future.
Great. Paige,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Maybe, yeah, I was just going to add to that too. I think while I view that as like definitely like the tech future, the AI and interconnected systems, I think that stuff is just technology is going to keep evolving and changing, and we're going to have to, get used to that. But I think then that might force us to focus on some other things too, like building that strong kind of foundation and safety culture within our organizations is going to be really vitally important. I think that value some of this kind of continuous learning and adaptability to kind of try new things as they come on board too. So we're going to have a summit here in a couple of weeks. That's like, the unexpected benefit of trying new things. And so I think having kind of a strong culture and employee buy-in on some of this stuff, if you want to be at the cutting edge of safety tech, you're really going to have kind of that employee trust and strong safety culture embedded in order to even be able to go after some of these new kind of technologies and test them out. So I think that'll be increasingly important as we move forward too.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, like an evolving culture and openness. That's a great point. All right, we only have a few minutes left. So if you could each give one piece of advice to an employer looking to implement safety solutions, technologies, and kind of future proof, they have to make an investment. Obviously, we know that it depends. It depends on what you need. But what one piece of advice would you give an employer looking to make a change?
I would say my number one piece of advice is to start small, start with small scale pilots and iterate up from there. These pilots really enable you to trial a technology before you sink too much into it resource wise, monetarily, and use this as an opportunity to learn. Don't go into it with, try not to go into it with, these preconceived biases that this technology is going to be fantastic. Be open to your employees when they're giving their feedback. Try to address any concerns that they may have. And really try to learn during the course of that small scale pilot, is this going to be a good fit for you? Does it match what your organization needs? And are your employees going to respond well to it? But start small and learn from your failures, and definitely don't be afraid to fail, because even in those failures, you can still learn.
Great advice. All right, Paige, we'll end it with you.
I'll just, maybe to piggyback off some of that, I think just seeking that employee feedback is so vital. I think sometimes safety and health professionals or safety and health leaders of organizations might be really excited about a new tech, but I think you got to have that employee buy-in, and they need to think that using the tech is safe and comfortable, and they need to know how to engage with it. So I think making sure that there's kind of a two-way street there, that both the safety and health leader, is involved in that, but also getting that feedback, often from your employees, I think is going to be, really key moving forward. So not just really adopting new tools, but making sure that people are really empowered to fully use them and then provide their feedback on them, I think is key.
All right, great. I feel like we did hit on a number of themes, like it definitely resonate. So whatever your challenges, whatever your size of company, whatever, so, investment you're able and willing to make, whatever industry you're in, there are definitely some common approaches and feedback and advice that I think cross cut all of that. So hopefully, audience members, you found this helpful. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Paige and Kenna and Hannah in the background as well for joining us. We look forward to continuing the conversation. So please feel free to reach out and ask any additional questions you have. We can connect you with the National Safety Council, and we will speak again soon. Thanks.
Thank you.